Joe Richardson, civil rights attorney at McHugh Law Group, getting into it once again, breaking it down, the law and common sense.
Joe, I go to you. So it seems to me the biggest difference would be minors, right?
Right, yeah, which what they thought might be happening with P. Diddy's cases that was rumored for so long. But yeah, it was minors. I mean, they did things where they talked about Aaliyah, who he had been married to 20 years ago, and frankly everybody knew. But yeah, a lot having to do with minors. Even though, interestingly, he had been acquitted of a charge related to a minor several years before. This was the government's second run at him. I don't remember if that particular one, the first one was federal. I think it was state, but this was their second run. And this time they did RICO. So the minor situation was in there, but it wasn't the actual charge itself. But yeah, and another commonality you have here is that he was prosecuted by himself, even though you're alleging a conspiracy, which is always very interesting that you could do that with RICO. So.
Do you think TriStar will be under investigation, because they surely did know where the transactions were going, right? Now, just to give everybody a little context here, I believe this is TriStar Sports and Entertainment Group. It's come up before with respect to other celebrities, has come up during the course of this case, particularly, I believe, a Robin Greenhill from TriStar, and Combs' former assistant, Jonathan Perez, said that he submitted reimbursement invoices to TriStar, acknowledged that Greenhill was in charge of releasing funds to Sean Combs, other members of his team. Payment of money, flow of money, very important for a racketeering case, transportation to engage in a prostitution case, sex trafficking case. You think TriStar is going to be under investigation, Joe?
I guess it's a possibility, but obviously the government has decided that P. Diddy was their guy. They could have prosecuted other people in this case as well. Now, to the extent maybe, we got 80 civil lawsuits out there, and to the extent that TriStar helps someone tell their story, maybe TriStar is involved with that. Maybe TriStar is a defendant in one of these things, even though I haven't heard that said one way or the other. But it looks like to me that the government has decided that P. Diddy is going to be their guy. And so could TriStar be looked at, at some point? Yeah, I guess, but you could do that with a lot of companies. I imagine a lot of things that, people use, P. Diddy staff use to help, connect the dots in terms of the things that they were trying to do upon instructions by P. Diddy. But I haven't heard anything that says the government is focusing on that. They can focus on anyone they want, but maybe they become part of someone's story on one of the civil cases.
Why did the drug mule have his charges dropped? And this is from Miss Guidove. Brendan's charges were dropped in exchange for his testimony, correct? RICO doesn't have to show profit, but only that he benefited, right? A lot of parts to this. So first of all, I'm going to throw it to you. If the charges were dropped so that he'd be a cooperating witness, why was he granted immunity at the beginning of the day, at the beginning of the week? I mean, he was going to plead the fifth. What am I not getting here?
If I recall, I believe that he got a lower charge that he was able to do diversion on. So it's a little bit different there. But to the larger point, he does get immunity on a lot of the other things that theoretically he could be charged on. Obviously, the prosecution, particularly because they rolled him up at the time that they did the raids that they did, prosecution thought that he would be useful. When somebody's going to be useful and he helps you get the big guy, it's not out of sorts at all, whether you're talking about RICO or something else, to potentially prosecute a whole lot of folks and use somebody lower on the totem pole to get the guy higher on the totem pole.
Yeah.
And so that's what they decided to do here.
By the way, you're right. So the state prosecutors, they dismissed the charges because according to his attorney, Brian Bieber, he completed a pretrial diversion program. But the federal case, right, they didn't strike a deal with him just yet. Interesting to talk about that, though, and here. I'm sure that, Joe, you would agree that would probably come up. I mean, that his arrest has to come up during his testimony?
Yeah, no doubt about it. But clearly, the prosecution must believe that his testimony is useful enough where they can just take that hit when he gets crossed on those types of things. Obviously, and particularly with him being towards the end, I would imagine that this might be one of these zinger witnesses towards the end that really helps them put the last impression on the jury's mind that, yeah, this is a criminal conspiracy. Yes, this is fill in the blank. And he ought to be convicted on all three of these things. Obviously, he's supposed to have something juicy, and that's why they've set him up to testify when he testifies in the order of things.
Joe, I'll start with you. This is from Daniela 3984. What would happen if the jury can't make a decision?
Jury can't make a decision. The judge will be like, go back and try to make one again. But theoretically, if they can't come to a decision down the road, then there's the potential for mistrial. And then everybody's got to decide what's going to happen. If there's no guilty verdict, if there's no acquittal, that means that the prosecution, the government, has the opportunity to actually do this again if that's what they want to do. But we're a long way from that. Like to think they'll get across the finish line in some way that gives people finality. Of course, if this doesn't come out to a total acquittal for Diddy, Diddy's gonna appeal on everything that he can in any event. So maybe we won't get there. Maybe that's a pipe dream. But one step at a time. If they don't come to a decision, and despite the judge's urging and imploring them to do so, then theoretically a mistrial could be found.
Joe, this is from Ascending Ange. If the jury votes not guilty on a charge that the judge feels was proven, could the judge potentially override the verdict, Joe?
Ooh, I don't want to mess myself up on the federal side, but I would see it going the other way first. I don't see the judge. The judge is not going to have the right to find a guilty verdict when the jury has found somebody clearly not guilty. So that should be a no.
Okay, Joe, we got a question from Alexander Mateo. With so many witnesses being granted immunity, doesn't that by itself help make this RICO charge more clean cut?
I guess it depends on who you ask. Each and every one of them, as will come out on cross, they've got reasons to testify as they're testifying, right? They've got reasons to stand in the shoes and in the position that they're standing in, right? And that will come forth. So that doesn't necessarily clean the charge up because they're still subject to cross-examination. There's still a question as to how well they'll testify. The existence of people that actually took deals, took pleas, and have immunity in and of itself doesn't mean that, of course, the prosecution feels better about their case, right? Because they feel like they've got the right people testifying. But that doesn't mean that these guys can't get sliced and diced in cross-examination, or that they'll be particularly believable in the first instance, or connect to the jury where the jury says that they are particularly compelling and the case turns on them. That's a separate question.
Got a question here for you, Joe, from Mylan Borbin. If there are minors, could it be that they might do another case for that when this one is over? So it goes to a question I raised to Candace before. If the feds had, evidence regarding him abusing minors, wouldn't they put everything into this trial? Wouldn't they put everything they have at a federal level against Sean Combs? Or are they saving it for a case down the road?
No, I don't think they're saving it because, among other things, listen, one of the things that I think may potentially affect even those percentages that you were just talking about with Philip is when you are prosecuting a star, someone with resources. Some people, that some folks don't want them to be guilty. I mean, I'm still scratching my head as to how he got off on the case involving Shine years ago, right? That being said, because that you're facing somebody with resources, he didn't need $50 million to stay home because they weren't going to let him stay home with house arrest. So he's got plenty of money to pour into his attorneys and his team of attorneys, right? They're going to put everything at him they possibly could. So if they actually had something as it pertains to a minor, there's no doubt in my mind, as it's been said before, that it would be in this case because they want an all hands on deck, all evidence on deck approach to see if they can really get this guy.